Welcome to Faith for the Apocalypse. This channel is a space for us to come together to talk about faith, politics, and whatever else we want, which this week will definitely be some history and science fiction. This video is a part of our weekly and daily Devo video series. If you are interested in getting daily or weekly emails with Devo handouts, you can find more information and sign up at the link below. Also, I want to let you know that this is just the first of 3 videos that will be posted this week. On Wednesday, we have a video coming out called What is Equity Anyway? Defining DEI, where we will look at what does DEI really mean and what is the history of DEI and some of its practices. And then on Friday, we will be posting our end of the month just for fun video. And this month, we are talking about religion, philosophy, and extraterrestrial life. So that is going to be the time to show up with all of your nerd energy. But now that we have all of that out of the way, let's dig into our topic for today. Monday, January 27th is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Now, this holiday is extremely important as it honors and commemorates the many victims of the Nazi Holocaust. This holiday is also vitally important in fighting against misinformation and false claims that the Holocaust never happened or it wasn't actually as bad as everyone says it is. This day is always important, but this year, Holocaust Remembrance Day takes on a totally different tone for those of us living in America. This year, we are attempting to honor and remember the many victims of the Holocaust while simultaneously witnessing our government fall into patterns laid out by the Third Reich in Germany in the 1930s and the 1940s. I think a lot of us are feeling bewildered, lost, and confused at this point in history. So, in an attempt to respond to the current moment and honor this holiday, today we're going to spend some time reflecting on Hitler's rise to power and early days as chancellor, especially how it relates to what's kind of happening in our current political system, before moving on to a discussion about Holocaust victims and populations who were affected by the Holocaust, and closing with a conversation about the role of lament and confession in our religious responses to the atrocities we have seen and may continue to see around us. Let's start long before Hitler was elected chancellor. If you've watched as many World War II movies as me, you might be familiar with the Sturmabteilung, or stormtroopers, also known as the brown shirts or the SA. Some of us might be more familiar with the SS. The SS actually replaced the SA when it was seen as a more palliative option as an official military organization by the government, media, and the general public. As a side note, the stormtroopers you're thinking of are named after these stormtroopers because Star Wars is really just Nazis in space, and you should really rewatch it from that perspective. But getting back to our topic today, the brown shirts were the original paramilitary group of the Nazi Party, and they played a really important role in Hitler's rise to power. You see, Hitler founded the SA and grew and expanded it by consolidating several very similarly dressed but wildly divergent paramilitary groups. They're called the brown shirts because they wore brown shirts. And many of these groups were composed of veterans of the Great War and found sympathizers in both police and military. The stormtroopers served as thugs. They violently squashed dissent, they engaged in armed combat with other resistance movements, and they terrorized the public, ultimately working to consolidate all armed groups under Hitler's power. In 1921, Hitler and 2,000 members of the party engaged in an armed coup against the government, which was ultimately thwarted and put down by a combination of police and military. The Nazi Party was outlawed, and Hitler was sent to prison where he wrote Mein Kampf. However, thanks to cooperation from mass media and a fear of appearing biased, this ban on the party only lasted for 2 years. After those 2 years, a now more respectable Nazi party was able to run for parliamentary elections, gaining a plurality, and Hitler is elected chancellor with just over 37% of the vote. More people voted against Hitler than voted for Hitler. Now, as another aside, prior to this vote, Paul von Hindenburg, yes, that von Hindenburg, had the opportunity through a petition to legally block and ban Hitler from ever taking power or running in future elections. He didn't do so because he wished to uphold political tradition and avoid appearance of bias. This failure lost him the support of the members of his own party and ultimately the election, because Hindenburg upheld tradition despite the fact that Hitler had promised to subvert the Constitution on day one, which he did. Hitler was elected and spent his first 54 days legally dismantling German democracy. He installed his cronies who had previously attempted to overthrow the government and consolidated power in almost every aspect of public life, destroying the Republic. The Weimar Republic's fear of seeming bias ensured that Hitler had the lightest possible sentence for leading an armed uprising against the government, which led to its own destruction. The similarities are, quite frankly, staggering. Trump's pardoning of January 6th rioters provides him with a loyal paramilitary support that can be used to further and enforce his agenda while he, at the same time, seeks to expand and consolidate control over the US military. It is Trump's agenda to replace our generals with those who are loyal to him. After all, he says that he is jealous of the loyalty of German generals. And when asked for what time period he was speaking of, he said the 1940s. Looking forward, I think it's really important that we remember that everything Hitler did was legal. Hitler manipulated and mobilized a financially struggling, largely undereducated minority of the population by referring to a myth of previous greatness that never existed and speaking of the dangers of shadowy threats within. He then won an election and installed his cronies into power, those very same people who supported and helped with an armed uprising against the government just 2 years earlier. And they changed the law to accommodate their nefarious purposes with consequences that we all know were devastating. The Republic failed to take legal steps to protect itself, and now we all must live with the consequences. So here we are, commemorating International Holocaust Remembrance Day and remembering the many, many, many victims of the Nazi Holocaust. Now, there's been a lot of work to fight against disinformation about the Holocaust and raise awareness about anti Semitism and how anti Semitism led to the Holocaust and how devastating the Holocaust was for Jewish members of the community. So many of us probably already know that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. We may also know that Jewish people were not the only people sent to concentration camps and killed, so we've also seen a figure that 9 million people were killed in the Holocaust. But the people killed by the Nazis were not only people who were taken to concentration camps. In fact, prior to the establishment of these industrialized murder centers, vans that were used to gas individuals or shooting squads that went through towns and murdered and buried people where they lived were practiced fairly widely. An estimated 17 million people were systematically murdered by the Nazis. I'm going to say that again because I think it's important we feel that number. An estimated 17 million people were deemed permissible victims and exterminated legally by a political party. Jews, Soviet citizens, Czech nationals, Roma or Gypsies, Serbs, trade unionists, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, gay people, all individuals whose lives were cut short because they were deemed to be a threat by the party that was in power. The loss is difficult to comprehend. And what do we do with this? What do we do as we look at the horror of the past with the knowledge that the future could be even more terrifying? I think our faith provides us with two really good starting points. It provides us the opportunity for lament and the opportunity for confession. In the Bible, lament is a form of expression through which patriarchs, prophets, and leaders express their frustration and pain and suffering to God. Lamentation is a listing of struggles and a demanding of the attention of the divine. It is calling out to God, see my suffering, see our suffering. There are examples of lamentations throughout the Bible. There are some fantastic examples that come from the book of Job as Job is responding to his immense loss. Our brief scripture pericope for today is a piece of lamentation that comes from Psalm 137, verses 1 through 4. The scripture says, "Alongside Babylon's streams, there we sat down, crying because we remembered Zion. We hung up our lyres in the trees there, because that's where our captors asked us to sing. Our tormentors requested songs of joy. Sing us a song of Zion, they said. But how could we possibly sing the Lord's song on foreign soil?" I think many of us today are wondering how we can continue to sing the Lord's song when the ground we walk on feels like foreign soil. Today, we lament. We cry out for the pain that occurred in the Holocaust, and we cry out for the pain that is occurring in the world around us. Instead of running from feelings of suffering of ourselves or our others, we embrace those feelings, crying out to God, even when we don't understand, and say, God, see our suffering. But more than that, we also have to take into account those places and spaces where we ourselves have been a part of the problem. Those areas where our own failures have led to continued and expanded suffering in the world around us. We have a second reading for today, which is not actually a piece of scripture, but a poem with which I'm sure many of you are familiar. It's called First They Came, and it's by Pastor Martin Niemöller, who is a member of the German Confessing Church, which opposed Nazi involvement in theological matters. The poem goes like this. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, for I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Many of us are taught this poem as a kind of cautionary tale. And it's important that I think we hold on to that now as we are seeing increased oppression. But it's also important to remember that this is a confession. It is an admitting to failure to resist the systems and practices that have led to the death and destruction around us. Germany has done some pretty amazing things coming out of the Holocaust. You may not realize this, but it is illegal in Germany to say that the Holocaust never happened. It's also illegal to show Nazi symbols like a salute that we all saw recently from Elon Musk that cannot be shown in public in Germany. There is an intentional awareness of guilt involved with the perpetuation of hate that has created a change in behavior moving forward. Now, many of us, all of us, are horrified with what's going on, and some of us might feel completely blindsided. But the reality is that the situation that we are in now was predicted and fairly predictable. There was a long road that we can examine in another video that has led us to this point where we are on the brink of fascism in the United States. But the warning signs have been there, and collectively, friends, we did not do enough to prevent it from coming. And so, as we look forward in fear, this might be a good moment to turn inside for some internal reflection, to find those areas where we can confess our own failures and complacency. Not to sit in a place of guilt or self loathing, but to begin to identify those places and spaces and practices and things that we can change and transform to do differently, so we can build a different future, so we can prevent the horrors of the past from continuing in our horrible present, so that we can respond and resist and fight for justice in every way we can, in every place we can, as much as we can, for as long as we can. Because that is what our God calls us to. We lament the pain that exists. We confess our role in creating that pain. We atone and move in a different direction, and we seek to do better, never forgetting those who were lost along the way. Thank you for joining me today. If you like this video, if you appreciate the content that I'm putting out, please like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, share the Devo sign up, share that Facebook group. I'm just trying to put content out in the world that might be helpful to people in this time of chaos, and I would really appreciate your help just getting the word out and letting people who might be interested know that this resource is here. If you're following along in the Devos this week, we have a packed week of content. On Monday, we will honor Holocaust Remembrance Day by talking a little bit more about lament and praying along with 2 poems written by folks who lived through the Holocaust. On Tuesday, we're going to dig in deeper and look at the activities within the German Christian Church during the Holocaust as we reflect on how our own religious institutions are responding to our current moment. On Wednesday, we will talk about the diverse victims of the Holocaust and have a conversation about dehumanization and permissive victims and how that applies to our current contexts. Thursday, we're going to look at the kind of confusing fact that those on the far right tend to be anti-Semitic while also supporting the state of Israel. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be the case. And then Friday is our self-care day. And this week we are talking about comedy as resistance as we reflect on the power of Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. As you go forward into this week that is sure to be another completely packed news week, I encourage you to remember that you are a beloved creation of God that needs care yourself. Make sure that you take some time to turn off the news, take a breath, eat a meal, drink some water, talk to a friend, walk around the block, do something that makes you laugh. This is going to be a long road, and we don't know for sure where it's going to lead. So it's vital that we continue to rest and take care of ourselves so that we are in it for the long haul. Thank you again for being here with me. I pray that you find peace and joy in your time this week. and I will see you again next week.